next 2 days, you guys are going to learn so much. Brain's going to explode, but probably 90% of you are going to walk out of here and have this incredible career in music by some of the stuff that you learnt here today, and especially in this panel. So this panel is, just let me have a look and get the changing nature of the way bands break. So obviously there's a massive change in the way the music industry over the last 20 years, and probably over the last 10, it's been the biggest change in the history of music, probably going back to when we went from tape to CD. So today we have an esteemed panel of guests. But I could tell you so much about them. I could tell you some very big stories about the man sitting next to me, but I won't. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, and I think we should start from our international guest who, I can say one thing, that Q Music said that her voice was one of the most important voices in music in 2012, so obviously knows a little bit about it. Jen Long.
Sadly, that was a few years ago. I'm rubbish now. You're going to be very disappointed.
And Jen, can you just tell us a little bit about your background? Sorry, that's
hi, I'm Jen. I did a show on Radio 1 for a few years called BBC Introducing. I now work for the TV channel on the BBC, the youth TV channel BBC 3, doing their festival coverage. And I run a label called Kissability, and I'm the music editor at a new ticketing app in London called Dice.
We'll have a discussion about that after this. This will be good. Pam is from Inertia. Pam, give us a little bit of your background.
Hello, I'm Pam. I'm the Marketing and Promotions Director at Inertia. Inertia is a label and distributor, and so we look after marketing for artists, publicity, physical and digital distribution. We also have a sister company called Handsome Tours who does touring, and another sister company called Gaga Publishing, who is a publisher. And yeah, I work with all sorts of artists from Japanese wallpaper to Sia.
Beautiful. Benny Thompson.
I'm Ben Thompson. I am the director at Corner Presents, which is a music or venue booking and publicity entity. We work with several venues around Australia, including the Corner Hotel in Melbourne, the Northcote Social Club, the Newtown Social Club in Sydney, 170 Russell, which was formerly Billboard in Melbourne, and Shebeen in Melbourne, which was formerly Manchester Lane. And we're looking at growing and working with venues right around Australia so we can kind of work as a one-stop shop for booking music into venues around Australia. We also have a large community of Corner Presents followers that we communicate with via our social media platforms and our e-newsletter and that type of thing. So predominantly venue booking and publicity.
Guys, I guess to start off with, and obviously the first question is really, really simple, and we look at the biggest change in music across and probably all entertainment is the digital age and the internet. It's changed the way that obviously bands can reach an audience. It's broadened the ability to build an audience very quickly. I guess within that realm, what would you guys see as the major difference in the way a band can break through using online activity?
I think the thing about going online is that it moves so fast and changes so fast that it is always an ongoing journey, and there's so many different answers to that question that I think, you can look at the advent of mobile right now, and that so many things are happening on your phone. You can look at streaming, you can look at video, you can look at digital sales and distribution, you can look at everything. There's so many different areas that and it moves so fast that there's not really one right answer.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, you look at the different ways that you can now sell your music digitally, whether you go through the big stores like the iTuneses of the world and the Google Plays, or whether you use Bandcamp and you do it yourself. But also you can just use digital media to get your music out to a wider audience so much more quickly. And that's just the biggest change. And it seems fairly obvious until you start to see the results and you start to see the ramifications of how that can affect the way an artist develops, or where an artist plays, or who finds out about an artist. And that's kind of what we'll probably talk more about today.
Yeah, I'd agree with both you guys. I think these days, since the advent of the internet, and I guess more so in the last 5 or 6 years, the advent of social media, and all the different services that music can be hosted on, just means that these days artists can connect with people all around the world in a very, very short amount of time, and grow followings quite quickly without, I guess, the traditional sources of finding out about music.
And it's like, but it's almost like a democratization, but at the same time it's a catalyst. So you see artists becoming far bigger, far more well known, kind of excelling so much faster, but at the same time careers seem to end a lot sooner. So
on that note, that's an interesting note when you look at it, that you can have access to such a broader audience so quickly that in a lot of cases you think that bands are putting their stuff online, that all of a sudden, it goes viral, things are crazy, but they actually don't necessarily have the tools to actually take advantage of that, 2 million views and so forth, and everyone's all over them, but they actually aren't able to take the advantage. Do you see that being a little bit of a problem? And when we look at our audience who are here to work out what they should be doing, should they think, I guess, further about when it is time to put things online and where you're at before you take that step?
I think that it's always great to have a plan ahead with a rough idea of when you want to put your music out, where you want to put it out, what you're hoping will happen, and where you want to go from there in terms of, maybe you just want to build the respect of a small audience and you want to put your music out there and you want it to find them, and then you want to grow from there. Or, to be honest, when a song gets out there and starts going crazy, there ain't a whole lot you can do about it. And if you're lucky enough for that to be happening, it is really important to try and put in a bit of planning behind it as well, so that you can start to make the most of it and get a bit of a team around to help you. But at the same time, it kind of comes down to the art. And if you've got a great song and you build success from that song, if you have more great songs, then you'll continue to build success. Whereas if that was the one song that you had at that time, then that's probably going to be your success for that moment. And one thing that's different is that you don't see people and artists growing quite as slowly and building their audiences quite as gradually. And so that sometimes that can mean that fans can drop off pretty fast as well. And that's kind of what you were talking about before, Jen.
yeah, I think there's a crowd mentality that surrounds the internet, and I'm sure we're all guilty of writing tweets being like, oh my God, this song is the most amazing thing I've ever heard, because one person says something and you want to kind of get on board with that, so suddenly something becomes this huge, amazing thing, when actually, back at about 10 years ago, it would have been like a slow burner on radio, but now it's like straight up there. And I think it's quite tempting as well to buy into that, and especially if you're an artist and you're being offered, this like great video concept, and you're being promised it's gonna go viral or something, and you're like, oh my God, I could have like X many hits. But then there's so many bands where you think now, and you're like, someone mentions them and says, oh, do you remember that band, The Automatic? And you're like, oh, they had that song Monster, and you're like, oh, that song, And there's all these like bands that can have one hit, but it takes a lot of work to back that up and to keep going. And there are bands that do try and keep going, and it turns out they just had like the one big song. Whereas then there's artists that do, I think now are starting to become more aware of it and shying away from kind of taking that one song and running with it, and perhaps even leaving it off their record. If you look at a band like Foals, who had a huge hit in the UK with a track called Hummer that was used on a TV show advert, and that was like a massive song, and they purposefully left that off their album because they kind of wanted to shy away from that hype and have that one song as their calling card. And they went back and like spent a long time on their first record, and then when that did come out, they sort of built from there. And now on the third album, they're headlining festival stages. So I think it's the option of picking that one big burst that's going to get you all that fame, but it's probably going to be quite short-lived, over going back and working as hard as you can and building something that you're really proud of as a back catalogue.
Interesting there, when you talked about Foals, you talked about a song appearing on Ad as Sync. Obviously, the way that we deliver music and get music heard has changed. We've got our traditional radio and so forth, then online, but also, obviously, actually, music within adverts now is a way to be heard by a much broader community and so forth. Pam, obviously, you deal in that realm and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Well, what we found is that a couple of years ago, there was a lot more stigma between artists not wanting to appear to be selling out, especially early on, and not wanting to feature their work amongst ads. But what we're seeing more and more is that that's changing now, both from established artists like Nick Cave, who recently had his music on a big South Australian tourism ad, through to much smaller artists. And there's a lot more acceptance that that's a way that can, if that's a way that can allow you to do your first US tour, then it can be something that's worth it. We also find that some of our artists have stipulations. Like, you don't have to say yes to everything or nothing. You might be in the kind of situation where you'd never perhaps put your music to alcohol if you had an issue with that, or perhaps to cars if you have an issue with emissions or something like that. And so you can choose, and you can say yes to things and you can say no. But the other thing that we're also finding is that a few years ago, a lot of artists started going, oh, sync is my way to freedom and, you know, huge amounts of money and all of that kind of thing. What we're actually seeing more and more is that there are less of the great, big, huge, several $100,000 syncs or more, and there are a lot more small ones. And that makes a lot of sense when you think that there are a lot less big TV campaigns and big mainstream media marketing spends. And so what we're seeing is a lot more smaller, sort of 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 smaller syncs that will really help an artist's career. But those great big sort of monster whales, we're seeing a lot less of them, which is just the changing face of media, really.
And Ben, I guess for you, a lot of the kids here and so forth that are in bands would see a part of breaking actually playing a show at somewhere like the Corner. How's it changed in the way you guys are looking for bands and actually choosing bands and finding bands? Has that changed? How's that changed over the last sort of 5 to 10 years?
Look, I think the live scene has changed a lot and is a good reference point for how bands are now breaking. You know, I think 5 or 6 years ago we started seeing it at the Corner Hotel, where maybe Megan Washington was one of the first, where, you know, we booked her in for a show thinking that hopefully she would be able to sell out that show. And booking venues is not necessarily curating the venues we work with, it's kind of supply and demand. If there's a demand to see a band live, then we'll put the band in. We're not necessarily curating the bands that play there. But with Megan Washington, we booked her in for the one night, and word was spreading very, very quickly about her, and it was, I don't know if her first album had just come out, and tickets went on sale, and the first show sold out in 1 day, so we added a show, and then those tickets for the second show sold out in the next day, and that went on until she had 5 sold out shows at the Corner, which is the equivalent of 4,000 ticket sales, which is kind of crazy, and that popularity happened over the period of a couple of months. And 10 years ago, for a band to be able to sell out the Corner, they would probably be working a couple of years to work up to that point. And since then, there's been countless examples where bands are breaking in a short amount of time and being able to build a big enough fan base to sell thousands of tickets. And the benefit for a venue the size of the Corner Hotel or even the Northcote Social Club, that kind of thing, is that we would only book them in expecting them to sell out one show, and it ends up being multiple nights, which has been really, really good for mid and smaller sized venues. And I think that's just a sign of how bands are breaking these days. It's happening in a very short amount of time. And, you know, the live scene is a rite of passage in Australia, as I'm sure it is all over the world. And yeah, it's just very fascinating how quickly bands can get to that point. It's not necessarily years of touring, which has its negatives as well as its positives.
And just on that, guys, with the ability to be able to go on the rise so quickly, and it is so quickly, like, and as you said, it can be a band that plays Northcote Social Club, 6 months later can be playing the Forum or even Festival Hall, when you look at, you know, the trajectory of someone like Matt Corby and so forth. Do you think that it's going to affect the longevity of the career because it happens so quickly? Or, as you said, do you think if the music's of quality, the career will continue anyway?
I actually believe it's all about the music. I think if you write awesome songs, then you're going to have longevity. I think that it all comes down to how good your music is. And then, as these guys have already said, you might have one amazing song. If you can't write another one, then that is probably your career. If you can continue to write great songs that people love, then you will have longevity. And I think that in this day and age of the internet and social media and all the platforms where people are discovering music for themselves, because they discover it for themselves, they feel a bit of an ownership over it. And, you know, if the next song is a good song and it comes out in a good amount of time, then the fans will likely to stick by you. If there's not a next song, or it takes another year to release a song or an album, you know, and it's not up to the standard of the first song, then I think you might lose people, and I think that's probably a risk in the way things are working now.
It definitely comes down to the artist, and as you say, to the music. But with an artist, if you want a career that lasts for if you want to be making music that lasts for 30 years, then of course you can make music for 30 years because you can do that yourself. And especially with the internet, you can keep putting that out, and if you've got a fan base, you can keep connecting with them online, and you can do as much as you want. It's up to you. But if you want to be making a career for 30 years, I think there's not many bands and artists that I can think of from 20 years ago that have careers that lasted for 30 years that were completely successful and paid for their way and they didn't have to get jobs on the side. And there's so many bands as well that you think should be earning enough to live that still have jobs in the UK. I don't know what it's like here, but there's so many artists in the UK that are on their second or third album and are playing really large venues, and they're selling decent amounts of albums that are still working in pubs when they're not on tour, are still subsidizing their careers by doing jobs on the side. So I think, it all depends on the artist. It's sort of like the question, do you want to make music for 30 years or do you want to make a living making music for 30 years are two very different things.
I reckon, I totally agree with that, and it can be even more true here because we have so much longer distances and so many fewer cities between them, which makes a difference in terms of what your touring costs can be and all that kind of thing. But I also do find it, and I do think it comes down to the quality of the music more than anything else, and I think that transcends genres and styles, but I do certainly find working across a lot of different types of music, from folk, rock, electronica, metal, pop, where I do, that there are some genres where you just do seem to get fans who, when they like an artist, they will hold on to an artist and they will love an artist for years and decades. Whereas if you happen to be making music that's particularly of its moment, that's particularly popular at the time, then sometimes you'll find yourself, those kind of artists making that kind of music can find themselves with fans who are keen and excited about them for more like weeks and months rather than years and decades. And so I think that there is sometimes the style of the music and what's popular at the time can affect whether you have a fan base that kind of grows like this and like this and like this, or one that kind of grows like this and like this. And so, that is definitely something that we see that varies genre to genre.
Is it genre-based, or is it kind of more... Because I always see that sort of like the artists that connect the best with their fans are the more authentic kind of ones that are singing songs that they've written about personal experience, have come from the heart, and making music that they would be making regardless of whether they were signed, whether anyone was listening. Is that sort, or is it more...
I definitely do, actually. Yeah, I find that we notice that artists who aren't necessarily considered, they're so hot right now, this is a real moment for them, and that don't fit a particular style and that are that have perhaps more of a deeper content, do tend to find the fans that will hold on to them and stick to them forever. You'll find, for an example, we see artists like the Cat Empire, who will fill rooms and rooms and rooms and rooms and rooms around the country without a lot of airplay, and have done for over 10 years and will do for another 10 years. But they still have that kind of personal connection to their fans, where fans still quite often ask them if they've got somewhere to stay that night, or if they want to come around for a barbecue. And so that's, it definitely is an artist that can pull a really tight, close audience.
With regard to that, sorry, just quickly on that, talking about Cat Empire, it brings to mind that things haven't really changed. Like if we go back to Midnight Oil, they had no radio play until they had the #1 album in the country, which now you would never consider someone having a #1 album without having any radio play. But they played live constantly, anywhere, anytime, every university, 5 nights a week, up and down the East Coast, and then all of a sudden the radio station, and that's, we're talking 1980s. So have things changed that much?
Do you know what sorry.
I was just going to say, it's quite funny. I was looking at a poster that we had up at the Corner Hotel last night and looking at the bands that played in 1995, and 3 of the bands on that poster were played the Corner last year, and I thought it was quite interesting that those bands had maintained that level of popularity for that long and maintained a career at that level, which I think is still quite possible. Those bands might not have got a lot bigger, but they have maintained a career at that level.
I was going to say, a friend of mine is on tour at the moment in Europe, but he's just done a large US tour supporting Elton John. And from the albums that he sold supporting Elton after every night, he's actually climbed the US electronic charts in album sales just from selling in those venues to fans direct. Because the things in the US, the charts, what you've sold yourself contributes to your chart placing.
Fantastic. And I'm always a big believer in the live show, that if you get out there, that, as we said, different to the old days where I'd walk out of a gig and actually have to use a phone where you dialed it like that, and then it went and then someone rang up at the other end to say, hey, I've just been to the best gig ever, I've just seen this artist. Whereas now they walk out and you're actually connecting with over 1,000 people saying, I've just walked out of the best gig of the year, you've got to see this artist, and it goes so much quicker. But there are some other ways, and Pam, I guess you've got an act. When I was sitting down thinking of this, I was thinking of a couple of acts that were busking that have now gone on to bigger and larger things. One of them, who's an Australian that is not incredibly well known yet, travels the world playing massive festivals, plays to huge audiences, Dub Effects, who busks everywhere he goes, builds an audience, has over 800,000 or something followers on Facebook and so forth, has built this incredible touring circuit around the world. Here he'll play in venues of 1,000, in Europe and so forth he'll play to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. And obviously with Inertia, Passenger, and the growth he's had over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, totally. We started working with Passenger in 2010. And at that time, he's always played gigs and busked to get by. And for a long time thought that was going to be his lot. And when we first met him, he'd funded his album at the time through, he would basically busk and gig, and busk and gig. And he'd moved from Brighton, and he spent half his time in Australia, half his time in the UK. And he built a following, and he made enough money out of the busking more than the gigging to self-record his own album, and so he owns all his own rights. And he basically lived that kind of lifestyle for a very long time and wondered whether it would ever grow more. But as his following, he was the kind of artist who, every time he played to a show, that group of people would come back and they'd bring some friends. And it grew very slowly and organically for quite some time until he was noticed enough to do the Ed Sheeran supports here and in parts of Europe. From those, people started to hear a particular song called Let Her Go that started to get itself onto radio that way. Once it got onto radio, people loved it the world over, and last year I think it was one of the top 5 best-selling songs worldwide. And now he's not busking every day or staying in hostels every night anymore, but he still does busk around every tour, and they need to sort of set up roadblocks, and it can kind of get a bit Beatles-ish where he has to run away from screaming girls at the end. But he still does it, and that's because that's a really important way that he connects with his fans, and he'll never change that.
And he does different things. I remember when we launched our website, he was one of the very first videos that we ever had on our website, which was him on the Bondi Beach filming on a camera the fact that he was here to do a small tour while he was taking his clothes off and running into Bondi Beach with his hands waving, and we still get hits on that video today, and it's the largest video we've ever had on the site. So, and it just keeps going and people keep returning to it. I guess the other way for breaking is the good old-fashioned bit of notoriety, and that, I guess, hasn't changed over the years. In the old days, you would wait to hear a reporter talk about a band that had smashed up a hotel room, and that would go global. But now we've got, I guess, people like, whether it be Amanda Palmer, whether it be local band Sticky Fingers, whether it be DZ Death Rays smashing bongs thing. Do you think that's a way that a band can use to, I guess, that instant viral, creating something that's instantly viral, or it's just part of their flavour that they like to get up on a rooftop and won't hop down even though the police are holding a gun at them?
That's like any publicity is good publicity, I guess, Leigh. Yeah, I don't know. I think Sticky Fingers, they're getting a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a party band, but I don't think that's hurting their career at all. I think that's
it seems to be growing it.
Yeah. I think it's good for your career if you've got the music to back it up. But if you don't have the songs and you don't have the fans who love the songs, that gives the fans more to talk about. But if not, then you just become those guys. Like if DZ Death Rays weren't an awesome band, they would just be those bong dudes. And so you kind of doing something just for the sake of making it viral just it won't last long for you. And you'll become, you know, even OK Go, who had that the video on the treadmills. For a lot of people, they're still known as the treadmill video guys, and they've still got a lot of great songs. But that was one of those things where the video kind of became more famous than the band, and that's something where you've got to kind of make sure that if you've got a great video, it's true to what you're doing.
I think, yeah, it all goes back to authenticity. There's nothing looks more desperate than someone trying to make something viral. I mean, what was the Twitter faux pas last week? Was it Rita Ora or someone like that who tweeted, if when this tweet gets more than one, if this tweet gets more than 100,000 retweets, I'm gonna drop a new track on Monday or something like that, and it got like 600 retweets, something like that, and then she tweeted being like, my account got hacked, you know, like nothing looks worse than lying or doing something that you're not, or trying to do something for a means to an end that isn't just you continuing with your career as you should. I think authenticity is so key, that if you build an image for yourself that isn't yourself, then people are going to find you out so quickly, and it's just going to look really sad. So I think, you know, if you want to be that like band that like trashes the hotel rooms and like, that should be who you are. But if you're actually like going home and getting on your laptop and looking at things on Tumblr, then maybe don't put that image out there, because you're probably going to make a better audience just by admitting that you just really love putting memes on Tumblr.
And from the breaking point of view, when we look at, obviously, TV shows now have become a big thing. We've just had, you know, so many Aussie bands appear on major TV shows in the US and so forth, such as, you know, Shepherd just were on Ellen DeGeneres, all of those sort of things. Do you see that now as a major way to break, especially into international markets? Is it going there and doing the touring and doing the hard yards like a Xavier Rudd, who now does incredible, or a John Butler, who does Fuge, or even Paul Kelly, who's been going back and forth to stage for years? Or that opportunity to get on a TV show that can break you like that?
Is it performing on a TV show? Sorry, performing on a TV show. I mean, it's all part of a bigger story, isn't it? You're not just going to be offered to perform on Ellen or on Jonathan Ross in the UK or something like that, unless you've got something to back it up and you've already put in a large amount of groundwork. So I think, you know, it's just a press opportunity that you should take. And TV definitely cuts through far greater light than radio. That's what I've noticed in the UK. When we do the festivals, we have a little treehouse thing. We have bands come up and play acoustically in the treehouse. And for an artist, someone like Daughter, who we had come up and do a session at Glastonbury, and their album went up to in the top 10 in the UK album charts, I believe. It was even numbered like 8 or 16, actually. I can't remember. It shot up the iTunes chart as soon as they'd done that TV piece. So TV certainly gives you a much greater exposure than press and radio, but it's, you know, there's not many slots, and you're not just going to get them through luck of the draw.
We actually, there's even fewer here, and even fewer than there were a few years ago, and we really need a few more great TV opportunities. Like, we see it here when Triple J televises the One Night Stand and stuff like that, but we lack the Jonathan Rosses and the Alan Carrs and people like that, where you can perform and connect when you've got the kind of song that does really well. Like, we get Graham Norton and we get Alan Carr here, and even that sometimes I can see a spike from an artist of ours that's performing on one of those shows, but in Australia it can actually be quite hard to get those kind of spots. It's a bummer.
And what would be, and again going back, because we can, you know, we talk at a level that's here, and I guess for a lot of the guys here, you know, I can't see Passenger in the audience. No, he's not there. Are looking at that first break, are trying to find that first break, and is it different or is it the same? What is the thing that, when you're sitting in the office at Inertia looking at whether it be touring or looking at an artist, where does that come from? What do they need to do to get that first break?
We do keep a close eye on Unearthed. That's definitely one of the areas that we like to see, because you can spot when a lot of people are getting excited about a new song, and it really does unearth things. We find that Unearthed is great. We also find that our artists can do really well. It depends on the genre, but SoundCloud, when you've got the right artist with the right song at the right moment, it really will pick up quickly. And from there, blogs start picking it up. From there, Hype Machine starts noticing that an artist and that a song is going particularly well. And for a lot of our work, those sorts of things can really be a sign that something's starting to heat up for an artist quite quickly. We've noted, like, that's how we've done quite a bit of work with a Melbourne artist called Japanese Wallpaper lately. He's 17, he's still finishing school, but he makes amazing music, and watching his connection to his fans grow and grow every single day is really exciting. Another similar artist, well, a different style of artist, but we're also working at the moment with Meg Mac, and she's just finished her first ever national tour, and it sold out, and she added some shows, but to see the fans just grow and grow and know, I saw the first show and the last one, and to see fans know all the words by the time of the last one was just amazing. And so, yeah, both of those artists have benefited from Unearthed, but also from having really good, authentic online presences. Like Meg Mac likes to dress her dogs, and that was an example. For her to trash a hotel room would be wrong, but for her to dress a Labrador in jumpers is totally.
I instantly want to check out Meg Mac. I think. Sorry, I was going to say what. You said first breaks. First breaks come again and again and again and again. I think I always like, it's sort of like a journey, and if you think of it as a kind of like cone, then your first small break might be, a play on Triple J and Earth. Then you've got like the next break of getting written about on Who the Hell, and then you've got the next break of going up the Hype Machine chart. You've got the next break of being asked to headline the Corner. You've got the next break of being flown out to the Great Escape or to South by Southwest. And people will discover you again and again. Someone, just a regular person who buys like 3 records a year at Christmas, maybe. That for them, discovering an artist is like hearing them played on Triple J or like hearing them played on BBC Radio 1. That's a discovery. And then for someone down the other end, like discovering an artist is finding a demo on SoundCloud that's had like 200 plays. So there's so many different ways that you can consider a break, and so many different people will find you along the way, especially at the start. Working in the music industry, you might look back and realize, you might think that your break was getting blogged about by that blog, but actually your break was when you got played by that DJ and that blog was listening. So there's so many, it's like there's so many different things.
Just a little plug for my own thing. Ben?
I was just thinking about the whole thing, actually. I was just thinking about 15 years ago when I started studying music business, and my housemate was in the band, and I was all gung-ho, and I loved the band, and I said, I'm going to get you guys signed. And I took their CD out to a whole lot of different record companies, and one record company actually liked it and was quite interested in it. And I told the A&R guy there that there are a whole lot of other record companies interested, and he got kind of competitive and excited. And it was Liberation Records, just after Michael Gudinski had started it, years after he'd done Soul Festival Mushroom. And the band ended up signing to Liberation and to Mushroom Publishing, and I believed in the band, and the guys at the record company believed in the band, but the band at that point had no fans. We put out their EP, nobody bought it. The band broke up, that was the end. We spent the advance on a van, which we kept, but we never got the money back to the record company. And I was just thinking then, these days there's a way of measuring if people will like a band, and that's by having a look at how many people already do like that band. So really, everybody out there that's a music lover is an A&R person in a way, because if that band is having a lot of listens on their SoundCloud or YouTube or have a lot of Facebook fans, they're already building a fan base. We're not relying on a record company to build that fan base for them necessarily. There's definitely a place for the record company, and that's to help build on something that's already there. But I think these days it's so much easier. Like, I don't think A&R people are discovering bands nobody's heard of, because by the time they discover a band, that band probably has 5,000 friends on their Facebook. 5,000 other people have already discovered them. I don't know of any A&R people who are out there these days discovering bands that nobody's heard of and making them famous. And I think that's a good thing.
I totally agree with that. as a record company, you can only ever, these days, because people can look behind the curtain and see if it's all smoke and mirrors, you really can only amplify what's already there and what's already great. And yeah, we definitely find that if something exciting is happening around an artist's music, then there are lots of things that will allow us to see it and feel it and go and find it. And then we can help with the next steps and the extra things and helping get the music out further. But the excitement's already got to be there.
And I think as Jen was saying, you know, as you were saying, that person that might have broken, you might have been the DJ that played it, that the A&R person heard. I think also there is the fact that the fan can be so much more important now. That influential fan that is in the audience that absolutely loves you, that just will not stop about telling everyone and getting you to come to a town. I remember early days of British India, and that one fan that was in, it was Ballarat or Seymour, that was just obsessed of trying to get them to go regional, and you've got to do this, and was emailing everybody from Triple J saying, you've got to play them, you've got to play them, you're the only station here, and so forth. It was a fan, it wasn't anyone else, and everyone's saying, well, what? I've got to have a listen to this guy's absolutely crazy, why is he so mad? But it gets other people listening to it, so all of a sudden they become equally as important in the way that you treat them, becomes equally as important because their voice is so much bigger than what it's ever been before. Yeah,
social media has definitely changed the face of fandom. And you know, when I was younger, actually not even when I was like old enough to like music, and still then we didn't really have like fan clubs. There were things that I read about in like books about the 80s. Do you know what I mean? Like fan clubs. Whereas now you definitely have like fandoms on Twitter. You have groups of fans who can connect so easily across the whole world because of social media, who are like, I know like groups of fans that are like best friends because they've all come together over a band and they've connected on social media, and you have a Twitter fan account and they can continuously be tweeting at different stations, and the band can totally be in charge of that as well. And it's the bands that work with those fans and kind of own that I think do best.
I guess probably lastly, before we'll go out to some questions soon, and guys, when we do get to the question time, if we can try and keep it on topic, because I know that sometimes when people get up here, you can talk to Ben later about how you get a gig at the corner. He will be happy for you all to line up in a single file and take everybody's questions. Lastly, just going on to the YouTube phenomenon, because obviously that has been a big thing. You've seen bands like, we had Gautier's video go absolutely crazy, but that also developed other things like Walk on Earth, doing a thing of the song, and all of a sudden that getting just as many views, and then them getting almost more coverage in Canada than what Gautier was getting, to Danny Rogers' chagrin. How do you capitalise on that, in the sense that once it does get up there and it starts going absolutely crazy, we're talking a band that no one knew about to just ridiculous amounts of numbers, what's the best way to capitalise on that? In the sense, from a record company point of view, you're obviously going to find out about it because you're hearing it, but should an artist be approaching everyone, making sure that they're PRing that out, sending it to record companies, letting everyone know we've got to that point?
I don't know, if you've got a YouTube video or a YouTube channel that's doing incredibly well, I think the first step is to monetize it. Most digital distributors will monetize your YouTube channel for you. But again, it goes back to the band. Like, you know, a band like Walk the Earth, they owned that. Whereas there's some bands, if you said like, okay, what you're going to do is I want you to sit down in front of a camera like once a month and record a cover, they'd be like, no, that's not for me. You know, or they try and do it and it would look terrible. So it works. It depends on different bands. Some bands, someone like FKA Twigs, say, who is just as much about the aesthetic and about the visuals as she is about the songs, I feel. For her, putting those videos online like once every few months, and for someone like I Am I Who Am I Am, I've probably got that. Have I got that right? Yes! Like, for her, like, you know, the videos were amazing, especially because they created so much talk about, who is it, Christina Aguilera? Who is it, The Knife? I don't know. Like, it created such a mystery around it. It was so exciting. So there's these different ideas that work with the artist, but work in an original way, whereas if you just go and you try and copy something that someone else has done, and it's not you, I don't think it's going to work as well.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that you don't really, when your video is starting to go off, you see it, and other people working in music will see it through their social media because they start to see it shared. So you don't tend to have to go, hey everyone, have you seen my video? It's doing very well these days quite as much, because if it's doing very well, then people usually have seen it. I think that also monetizing is really important as well, because if you have the good fortune of starting to get covers, if you've monetized your video, then some of the money will flow back to you. And the way that works is that when YouTube sells advertising, some of that money goes back to the video creators and the writers of the song. And so when you see a lot of people doing covers, even all of those covers of Sia's Chandelier, whether it's like a big person, a small person, no matter what it was, those covers and those joke versions all actually go back with a little bit of money to the artist. And so I think that, yeah, let people cover it and change it around and do weird stuff to it. Let them do things that you don't necessarily like, because other people can find them and other people will like them. And either way, you can earn some revenue from it, which can be cool.
But YouTube is definitely a really important way that people discover music now. So I wouldn't, even if you don't have enough money to make a video, just getting your music up on YouTube. If you've got something that you're putting on SoundCloud, then definitely put it on YouTube. Make yourself a lyric video, do anything. But it is such an important way of discovering artists and discovering music. Like, so many people, you say to them like, "Oh, have you heard that? Have you heard that new band?" Oh God, you know when you just go like pick a new band and then you forget every band. Have you heard that? I'm going to do a Kissability plug. Have you heard that new band, Summer Ghost? And people are like, oh, no. Like, sometimes people's first point of call is to go and look on YouTube. So I think make sure you are on YouTube, definitely, if you're a new artist, if you want people to discover you, because playlists are such a great way of, like, people finding new music and making sure you tag things properly. It is really important now.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, a friend of mine has 2 children in their early teens, or 15, 16, actually. And they listen to all their music on YouTube. They don't buy CDs. They don't subscribe to a streaming service. They don't buy MP3s. They listen to everything on YouTube. And I think that maybe that's the way things are with a lot of young kids that don't have money to spend at that point. Their first music listening experience is going to YouTube and listening on there.
But YouTube have just announced that they're launching a new streaming service that will be akin to Spotify, where you pay a subscription and you don't get any ads and you can listen offline. So it's certainly going in the same direction as the way Spotify has gone.
Lastly, 2 nights ago I was at Molly Meldrum's 50 years, and when I grew up, because I'm old, him saying, do yourself a favour and go out and buy this CD was a call to action that basically changed the face of a lot of artists, that you would walk out on Monday and you would go and buy an album on vinyl back then, or buy a cassette tape, and then eventually we got to CDs. For you guys, is there any one person that you either read, listen to, or that when they say that they love an album or love an artist, that you will immediately go out and go, I must listen to that artist?
For me, it's not any one person. I think that these days there are more options than ever to point you towards good music. There's people like Jen. There's people there's blogs. There's so many great blogs. Like, there's not just one Molly Meldrum and one influential radio DJ anymore. There's a lot of different people and a lot of different ways that you can get tipped off on new music, and a lot of that is just friends via social media, which I think is like old-fashioned word of mouth, but times 10,000 these days. You used to talk to someone on the landline telephone 20 years ago and say, oh, I love this new song that I heard on the radio. Now you post about it on your Facebook page and wherever, and thousands of people or hundreds of your friends find out about it. So
yeah, there might have been 20-something years ago, you might have relied on one person to make that purchase, but now it's so easy to listen to something that it's completely changed the face of everything. If you said to me right now, you should go and listen to XYZ, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, I'll check them out. And I could listen to it within, well, not right now actually, because the Wi-Fi here sucks, but...
Welcome to Australia.
Yeah, but you can listen to things straight away, so you don't rely on one person as heavily. You listen to everyone because it's so easily accessible.
Yeah, I agree. We find, there are certain radio people, and it depends on the kind of music that you like, and it can be anything from whoever looks after your favourite show on community radio. So in my case, I really like what Johanna Roberts, who does In the Pines on FBI, puts on. So I trust her, and there are certainly a lot of trust amongst some of the Triple J DJs in Las Vegas, Sam Rowe, I think those guys, what they love carries a good amount of weight. But I also sometimes find that for a lot of people, it's that person in your social network who always posts good stuff, who you've noticed that you always like the kind of things they're posting. They can be just as important. You know, they can drive you to a gig, they can drive you to discover new music. Sometimes it's just that person in your group who can be just as important.